Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to the show. This week's podcast is going to be just a little bit different. I want to talk with you today about something that it's actually pretty serious. The way I see it, there are two choices that lie before you. One is taking control of your own life and living as a free person. And the other is essentially being a slave to the system. Now, what does this have to do with herbal medicine? Okay. You know, when I started the free online herb classes that are at Rumble, I didn't realize just how important these were going to be. I just wanted to do something. I'm a little tired of this idea that you have to spend a whole lot of money to get quality education in herbalism. It shouldn't be that way. I want to make things available for the average person, for the common person, and really for especially rural people with large families. And as this has progressed, I did not expect the growth, to say the least. I mean, I thought maybe 50 people would do these classes. These classes are getting 400 people taking them. I mean, when I put out a new video, in the first week, maybe 200, but in a couple of weeks, 400 people have taken that class. I get messages on by email on the various social networks I'm on, MeWe, Parler, Gab. Gab's a good one if you haven't checked out Gab yet. It's a pretty cool site. And people are always asking me for resources, for references, and it's become just really, really great and interactive. And I think this may be one of the most important things I've ever done. And the more I think about it, the more I realize how really it is two options. When in my first podcast, I talked about how my great grandparents didn't go to doctors. Back then people had their babies at home. If you got sick, you went to a GP, a general practitioner. And for a few bucks, he'd check you out. He was usually an old guy. He'd seen it all before. Then they went over to the pharmacist. The pharmacist would compound the medication right there in the pharmacy. So first of all, they didn't go for every little head cold. I mean, if they broke a bone or were seriously sick, then they'd go to a doctor. Then they go to the pharmacy. And I mean, if they spent $5 at that pharmacy, that would probably be about the maximum, and maybe not even that much. And as far as the doctor, I don't think a doctor's bill, I don't have a reference right in front of me, but it was a fraction of what people pay today. So what happened? Well, that's the way things went, really until about the 80s. And then, well, okay, I guess there was a factor before then. All right, so here's a little history. Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was no conservative, okay? He was a socialist. He instituted wage and price controls. Now, I know some of you just got offended. I'm sorry. I try to avoid talking about politics on this show. I don't like the Democrats and I don't like the Republicans. Okay. And I don't, especially don't like Republicans like Richard Nixon, big government Republicans. I am philosophically a very conservative libertarian. How I vote, you can probably figure, but I do not like the Bushes, and I do not like the Nixons, and I do not like the Romneys, and I do not like the McCains, to put it very mildly. I think you know where I'm coming from. Richard Nixon instituted wage and price controls. That meant that when businesses were competing for employees, which is what they do, and the way business competes with employees is they pay the best for the best employee philosophically, right? If things work the way they're supposed to. Well, once those controls went in place, they couldn't offer them more money. So they began offering insurance as part of a benefits package. So by the 70s and 80s, everybody had insurance. Well, that wasn't the way it always was. People didn't have insurance universally before then. Well, maybe not universally, but you know what I mean. The average person did not have health insurance. You may have had a catastrophic policy, but when you went to a doctor, you paid out of pocket. Well, by the 70s, 80s, the doctors realized um, that because people weren't paying out of pocket, they really weren't focused on how much things were costing. So insurance was going to cover it. So the doctors began charging as the most insurance would cover. And the price started going up. Well, then it became a major industry. Huge corporations buying chains of hospitals, everybody becoming a specialist. Prices keep going through the roof. There's so many factors. One, there's the cost of filing the insurance, but two, there's everybody being a specialist, their education costs more. You know, if they don't run every test and they get sued for malpractice, someone's going to say, "Why didn't you run that test?" So now there are all these expensive tests, and all the price of medication's gone through the roof because the pharmaceutical industry has completely changed over the last 30 or 40 years. We don't have the pharmacists, the small town druggists compounding formulas very much anymore. We have this brand new medication that costs a fortune, and it's the magic pill for that problem. Until about 5 years later, when your liver fails, or 5 years later, when you have heart failure, because that pill was never intended for long term use. It was only tested and proven to be safe for short term use. But, you know, whether by design or not, there's a pharmaceutical industry that makes a fortune, more money than anyone could ever imagine, knowing that eventually there's going to be a class action lawsuit. They'll make $1 billion and pay 100 million. It's good business, right? Now, I'm not saying these are bad people. I don't think everybody's. I am not a conspiracy theorist, believe it or not. But why are things so expensive? you know, think about college. Why do tuitions keep going up? Tuitions go up because of what's called a price floor. If you go and you apply to a college and you're accepted, the first thing they tell you to do is fill out a FAFSA. This is your federal document you turn in, you find out what financial aid you qualify for. Well, you got a Pell Grant that the government's going to give you pretty much automatically. And then they'll tell you what other loans and grants and such you qualify for. So basically, the college knows exactly how much the average student can pay. And the tuition keeps going up because that floor keeps going up. The more federally subsidized loans there are, the more access that student has to money. Why in the world would a college keep tuition low? They're cutting themselves out of money if the government is going to help fund them. They take your money out of your pocket to pay for somebody else's college. In turn, that student is saddled with debt they're going to be paying on for years. It's the exact same thing when you go to a doctor. There is what you would call a Medicare or in some cases a Medicaid rate, okay? That's the amount the government is going to reimburse them for this procedure. Why would they charge any less than that? You know? That's the price floor. Everything they're going to charge is going to be on top of that for someone that comes in with private insurance. So you wonder why, like when Obamacare was announced, the insurance companies were thrilled. They supported it 100%. Why did the big, hospital chains and doctors associations and pharmaceutical companies support Obamacare? Wasn't it supposed to bring down the cost? No, it was never going to bring down the cost, and it hasn't. Frankly, if you thought it was going to bring down the cost, that was foolish. Anybody with a brain knew more government involvement was going to increase the cost and make things worse. I mean, after all, don't you just love to go to the DMV? You just love dealing with the IRS? You get into this system of going to a doctor, and I don't care if you're private payer health insurance or you've got Medicare, you've got Medicaid, whatever you've got. First thing they do, now, they want you in and out of that doctor's office in around 10 minutes. I think they go about a maximum of 12 minutes. If you have a problem that takes longer than 12 minutes for that doctor to solve, forget it. You just become a problem. You're now losing them money. So you go in and you spend all that time sitting in that waiting room. You spend all that time dealing with the receptionist and filling out paperwork, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You get back there, you've dealt with a nurse, there may be a nurse practitioner, you finally get to see the doctor. Doctor's in and out of there, and you leave there with a pill. And if they can keep that assembly line going, they'll make a fortune. So this is the system. If you think about, you know, okay, some physicians need a follow-up visit. Yeah, they want you to come back. But what about these wellness checks? Have you noticed that we're spending more and more time in doctors' offices? And why isn't the cost going down? Well, we're actually using more of the service, so of course the cost is going to go up. You want to reduce medical costs? Stop going back for those wellness checks. The idea that you're going to be healthier the more time you spend in a doctor's office is insane because malpractice, medical error, and overprescription is now the leading cause of death in America. Think about that. Just let that sink in. More than heart attacks and cancer and car accidents. That's crazy. You are going to be healthier the less time you spend in a doctor's office, unless you have a really serious condition. I mean, if you have, yeah, I don't know, cancer, and some people would say, holistic treatment of cancer is the best way to go. I don't have an opinion on that. You do what you think is best with that. But if you can treat yourself at home and not take an antibiotic for every sniffle and not take all these weird drugs that have all kinds of side effects that take, what is it Doc Jones says? If you really want to see something scary, read the little packet information on an ibuprofen bottle. The more we can treat ourselves naturally at home, the better off we are. Now, okay, does that sound crazy? To the average person, it sounds crazy. I can I can list people off the top of my head that think I'm absolutely nuts for thinking that I can be healthier treating myself with herbs and going to a doctor, and that government doesn't have all the answers and generally makes things worse. Well, think about this. When I was a kid, at least here in North Carolina, there was no such thing as homeschool. I mean, it was illegal. If you didn't send your kid to school, you went to jail. I mean, this program of public education that was supposedly invented for the good of everybody, right? To educate the populace. If you didn't go send your kids to school, you went to jail. Well, things kept falling apart. I mean, we've had a lot of violence in these schools. We've got a lot of gang problems. We've got almost year to year test scores lowering. I mean, here in North Carolina, 50% of kids graduate functionally illiterate. So yeah, it literally took almost an act of Congress, I mean, an act of state legislature or whatever, to allow homeschooling. And I think there was some federal legislation on that. I don't have kids. This isn't my wheelhouse. But now there's homeschooling. And people don't look at you like you're crazy. They think, wow, good for you. You got your kids out of that broken, corrupt government system and you're teaching them. Homeschoolers score better on tests. They do better in college. They do better. They make more money. Straight out of school. They're smarter because they're better educated. Now, why isn't You know, why aren't our educators the best educators? Why is it parents? Well, because they're in a broken system. So what we did, you know, and look, first of all, public education was never designed to give a good education to anybody. I'm sorry if you think it is. Go look up the founding documents. I mean, people, what was it, like Ford and Carnegie, Rockefeller. I mean, they were writing about how America needed a public education system simply to train people to work in factories, not to educate them, not to help them to think logically, but to make them factory workers in their, Ford Motor plant. It was never intended to turn out philosophers or even doctors. And if you think a teacher is going to get a better education because they have a degree in education, no. You know you're the best teacher for your kid. I am telling you, you're the best physician. Can we say that? I'm not speaking in terms of like how the government would define a doctor. I'm now speaking like, in the Bible, physician, heal thyself. Okay, I'm going to say you're the best physician for yourself. You know what's going on inside your body better than anybody else if you learn to take care of yourself. If you learn to take care of yourself and you learn to take care of your family, you are liberated from the system. I mean, and yeah, you think there's not some pushback on that? Why do you think that, they've made herbal medicine essentially illegal? Why do you think I have to be so careful in the words I choose and always give that disclaimer of I'm not a doctor and I'm not giving any medical advice? Nothing I say is to diagnose or treat any condition. You do your own research and you make up your own mind. I have to say this legally every single show and every article I write because this is big money. This is, if it's not the biggest, it's the second biggest, I believe, chunk of the American economy is the healthcare system. I mean, let that sink in. And now remember, yeah, you voted for that guy who said he was going to bring down medical costs. Sure, yeah, some people got insurance that didn't have it. And a lot of people, like the self-employed, no longer had, like myself, no longer had an affordable option for insurance. Some people got insurance, some people lost insurance. No one got cheaper medical care. That was never on the table. If it was, the pharmaceutical companies and the doctors and the insurance would not have supported it. All right. Now, I want you to think about this analogy. Now, I've discussed it with Marjorie Wildcraft a couple of weeks ago, and I just barely touched on it. And I just mentioned it briefly when I'm talking about college tuition. So much of our economy is not based on the real value of goods or services. It's based on debt. It's almost like, they say when you go to Facebook or Twitter, the product is you. They're taking your information, selling it. So you think you're using a service, but they're making their money off of you. Well, you kind of know that going into it. I don't think that shocks anyone. And you know that when you buy a new car, for instance, you drive it off the lot and it loses almost half its value. Boy, I mean, it's kind of a scam there, don't you think? Why do the cost of new cars keep going up and up and up? Um, well, maybe because people can get loans. See, people don't pay cash for cars anymore. You go and you buy one car and you get a loan for it. You drive it a few years, you're ready for a new car, but you haven't paid off that loan. They just roll it into the next loan. You drive it a few years and you go and the kit cost keeps going up, right? And they just roll that one in. And by the time you're through with the course of your lifetime, maybe you've owned 5 cars. If you ever looked at the interest you've paid, it would blow your mind. I mean, it would blow your mind. You didn't just go in and spend $40,000 on a car. By the time you're done, you may have spent $200,000. And you will still have that debt when you die, and your estate's going to have to cover it. See, they're not selling you a car, they're selling you debt. Why don't, the old Merle Haggard song, make a Ford and a Chevy still last 10 years like they should. Why don't cars last 10 years like they should anymore? Well, they probably do. I mean, 10 years is not that big a deal. My old Chevy's a 1989 Chevy 1500. Uh, Cheyenne. They don't even make them anymore now. It's all Silverados, right? Same, basically same truck with a different trim package. Still runs great actually. I need to do a tune-up, but I went and paid cash for that vehicle used, and I spent less than $3,000 on it. Spent another $1,000 to fix it up. It doesn't look new. I'm not trying to impress anybody. If I was one of those keep up with the Joneses type of people, yeah, I'd keep incurring more debt, getting another vehicle. But why? Now let's think about this whole system. All right, you graduate high school, supposedly. You're ready for college, right? You get into college, you're probably taking remedial courses because you didn't even learn to read in high school or do basic math. Uh, Immediately, you're incurring debt. You're getting those student loans. Everybody knows how hard those are to pay off. You go in and you got to choose a major, you got to pick a major, and they get you in that program. And boy, if they can get you to do grad school, I mean, yeah, they want you on that track because you keep incurring more and more and more debt. You're the product for the school. The education's not the product. You're the product. You get out of there, you're saddled in debt. You go to work. You're buying a house with a mortgage, or maybe you rent for a while, but eventually you're going to buy a house with a mortgage. And in a few years, someone's going to say, well, you need a bigger home, or you need new appliances, or you need to remodel. That debt just keeps going up. You bought a car with a loan. Now you've got required by law insurance, whether you use it or not. But boy, you used it that first time, and you're going back for wellness checks, follow ups. And what about this? We need to do this test, and that test. And how many people you speak with today that are taking, 15, 20 different prescription medications? When somehow my great grandparents who lived to be around 100, they weren't taking any prescriptions. Well, then, you're going to start eating the American diet that is almost guaranteed to give you heart disease and diabetes and probably cancer. Aren't we glad we got the government involved in nutrition and food? Yeah. You see where this is going? We're not existing to follow our dreams and raise our family and be good citizens and good neighbors and good Christians and everything. We're existing essentially to service debt and pay taxes. We've become livestock. You're just, you're like a chicken and they're coming and collecting the eggs every day. And eventually they're going to chop off your head and put you in the freezer. You are now the product for the government, for the education system, for the healthcare system, for the banking industry. And I mean, now we can talk about new phones and all the technological gadgets. I mean, why do these phones cost so much? Well, people are willing to pay, but what are people paying with? Credit cards, right? It's not money out of pocket. You pay it off in time, but by the time you pay the interest on it, that phone costs a fortune. This is the two paths. These are the two options. Okay. One, be livestock. I always say the one thing you learn in public school is to be herded like cattle and slop like hogs. If you follow that path, you'll follow it for the rest of your life. That's option number one. Be a product of livestock for the system. Option number two, learn. Learn to be independent. Learn a new skill. Learn herbal medicine. Grow your food. Homeschool your kids. Go take an auto mechanics course at a community college for like $75 out of pocket. Don't let anybody say you can get a loan for that. Okay? Work on your own car. Buy a used car. Don't take out any debt. Pay off your credit cards, cut them up, and never use them again except for emergencies. Wow, what a crazy idea, right? Live within your means, be independent, and actually be free. If we were a nation with that Jeffersonian model, that Jeffersonian mindset of independent families and farms and businesses all working together for our own determined self-interest, that's how an economy was supposed to work. I want to be a farmer. I have vegetables to sell. You want to be a cobbler or a blacksmith and you want to buy vegetables. There's no government interference there. You know, if they need to put a little sales tax on it to cover the roads, okay, we're okay with that. That's the way things should work. Independence, self-sufficiency. If you don't like the term self-sufficiency, I know some people don't. Think of it as resilience. People are freaking out right now. I mean, and with good reason. The electrical system in Texas has just gone down. People are freezing to death in Texas in the wintertime. My ancestors never would have relied on an electric heat pump to keep their house warm. They had a fireplace. They had a wood stove. They had at least, I'm going to say, 5 different ways of heating their home. Think about that. That's a permaculture principle. You got at least 3 different things supporting one element, and that one element does 5 things. I mean, I know that's kind of hard to envision on the radio, but if you think about it, if you have 3 or 5 different ways of heating your home, you're not going to freeze to death. Again, that's novel thinking to most people. You remember in Hurricane Katrina, people standing on their roofs waiting to be rescued. You know, I mean, James Gregory, again, my favorite comedian, he said, look, y'all, there ain't no such thing as a slow hurricane. Every single night on the news, here's the announcer saying, the newscaster saying, it's coming. It's going to be here at 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon. Get ready. Get ready. Get ready for the storms of life. And I honestly believe taking charge of your health, your diet, learn to cook, okay? Learn to cook. You will save a fortune if you cook your own food, and you'll eat better, and you'll be healthier. And some basic skills, a little gardening, a little plumbing, a little, just one little thing a month or even a year. Read. Listen to podcasts like this, okay? But basically, there are 2 options. Slavery, and I would say freedom, but freedom is contingent on government. All right, I'm going to say there are 2 options: slavery and independence, or resilience, if you want to put it that way. So, tell your friends about the herb classes on Rumble. It's Herbal Medicine 101. Go to my blog, read my articles, ask me questions, and maybe we won't have to be, figuratively speaking, standing on a roof waiting to be rescued. All right, y'all. Talk to you next week.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no 2 are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.